For now, let's go back to Ohio. We've been highlighting an important motions hearing against the defendant Samuel Hochstetler. He admitted to police that he killed a victim in this case, Rosanna Kinsinger, and this happened during sex. Of course, he labeled that as breeding. He's part of an Amish community, has been his entire life, and he told authorities he didn't mean for it to go as far as it did. His defense team is trying to get that confession thrown out. So this is a motion to suppress hearing. Let's pick it up with that testimony.
Yes, I'm called Samuel Hochstetler.
Hey, come on up, Mr. Hochstetler. Before you step up there, please turn towards me and raise your right hand. Your right hand. There you go. That's all right. Do you hereby swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I'll say the truth. I can't swear because the Bible don't let me, but I will say the truth.
That's fine. And that's why I say swear or affirm. So do you affirm that and promise you'll tell the truth?
I affirm.
Okay, then go ahead and have a seat.
You can move this as you need.
Okay. And for the record, all questioning is pursuant to our earlier conversation, David, that we limit to the discussion of the Miranda rights and what his understanding was to that, or his understanding as to whether or not he was in custody, as opposed to statements that he made, which may or may not have been incriminating.
And that was my understanding. The room is yours as well.
Yes,
Mr.
sir.
Stanley. Okay, with that, you may begin.
All right. Samuel, please state your name, loud and clear, first name and last name for the record.
Samuel Hochstetler.
You may need to be a little bold.
Samuel Hochstetler.
You could even pull the microphone.
All right.
So you
Yeah.
actually talk directly into that.
All right.
Yeah, real close.
Okay. And you've listened to the testimony that we've had today
Yes.
from Lieutenant Campbell and Sergeant Tracy, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you were obviously present on May the 5th, 2025 out on Dye Road.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What were you doing on that day prior to the arrival of law enforcement?
Day before
That day,
that day,
on May the 5th.
I was working on a
prior to
building.
their arrival.
I was working on I was either doing the outside of the building or doing something there by the post, with the post, so putting lumber on it.
Okay, you still might want to pull that a little closer to your mouth
And speak up.
directly into it and speak.
Yes.
Speak
Just
loud.
project your voice like you're yelling at somebody at a work
And
site.
pretend I'm in the back corner of the room. Okay? Say okay in that manner.
Okay.
That's better.
That's better. Thank you. All right. And when they arrived, how were you made aware of their presence?
Enos made a motion me to come over there towards him when he was up there by the trailer.
And what did you do at that point?
I walked over to him.
When you walked over there, who did you see, if you know?
Seen Enos there and the cops. I didn't know who it was.
Okay. How many law enforcement officers were there?
There were two, was Vest's son and then one of the detectives.
Okay. So when you say there were two with vests on, are you speaking of deputies being in uniform?
Yes.
And then one detective, and how would you know that they were a detective as opposed to a uniformed officer?
Well, he had talked to me before, and I almost knew I had seen him before. I wasn't quite sure, but I thought that's who it was.
Okay, when you say him before, have you seen him in the courtroom today?
Yes.
And who was that?
Not Lieutenant,
We've had Lieutenant Campbell and
Sergeant. It was Sergeant Tracy.
Sergeant Tracy?
Yes.
And in the video that we saw, a minute and a half or whatever it was when they came, and on May the 5th, which one was Sergeant Tracy?
The one in the red shirt.
The one in the red shirt?
Yes.
And when you approached him, what, if anything, did he say to you?
Somebody asked me how I was doing. One of them, I can't remember which one, and then he said they had a warrant for my search warrant or warrant for my DNA.
Okay, say that again, only louder. What did they tell you in your election?
He said that they had a search warrant, either set a warrant or a search warrant for my DNA.
Okay, when you say they said a warrant or a search warrant, were you able to hear the The video when it was played,
Yes.
what in fact was said, not based on your record
He said a warrant.
today. A warrant
Yes. So, for my DNA.
for your DNA.
Yes.
Okay. What else, if anything, did he say to you?
He asked if I would go with him in a cruiser to go to the police station.
What was your understanding of the purpose for going to the sheriff's office or the police station as you described it?
DNA. I didn't know what it was.
You didn't know what was. What was?
He said they want to do a swap for DNA, so I didn't know what he was going to do, what he needed.
Did you know what DNA was or what a DNA swab process would be?
No.
Was that ever explained to you before arriving at the sheriff's office?
No.
Was it explained to you upon your arrival at the sheriff's office?
After we was up in the room, he said they're going to take these Q-tips and swap me. That's the only time.
Okay, but I'm speaking of when you first arrived at the sheriff's office. Was it explained to you what the process for the DNA swabbing would be?
No.
John Day's still with us. There's a lot of back and forth with, do you understand this? No. Do you understand that? No. Is the defense making any headway here with their overall goal of getting this thrown out?
Well, they're doing what they have to do, and they're doing the best they can, but it's a tough one because, again, the defendant is articulate. The defendant seems intelligent, and for the defense to cross that threshold, they're going to have to convince this judge that the defendant was hoodwinked, was scammed into thinking that by talking to law enforcement, it was the equivalent of a religious confession or a religious encounter with clergy, for example. And that's going to be a tough threshold. And it's going to be very difficult for the defense to do what they're trying to do, but that's what they have to try.
What do you think about this statement, John, that he made during his confession? We don't know if it's going to be in or out, but he said, I wasn't in my right mind. I don't even remember exactly how she died. He admits to the suffocation, but he says it a couple of times. I wasn't in my right mind. Do you think that that's an avenue here for the defense if they can't keep this confession out?
Well, it cuts both ways because it shows some comprehension of what's a right mind and what's not a right mind. And so if you're the prosecution, you can pounce on that and say, well, what are you trying to say here? What's your point? But of course, the defense has to use what they've got to try to save this defendant. And by having him say, oh, well, you know, I wasn't that my right. I know the difference between my right mind and what's not my right mind. And in this case, I wasn't in my right mind. But at the same time, he's able to articulate the facts that led up to the suffocation, to the act of what he calls breeding. So, I mean, again, it's riveting testimony. It's riveting evidence from his statement to police. Whether it has the effect of saving him, of getting this statement thrown out, you know, in the final analysis, this is going to be fascinating to see where it goes.
Absolutely. John Day, as always, thank you for your valuable time on this Monday as we kick off another busy week here at Court TV. We'll get a break. When we come back, more from the defendant in this pretrial hearing for Samuel Hochstetler.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Julia Janae along with Ted Rollins, and we are following this case out of Ohio this afternoon. This is a motion to suppress hearing in the sex and murder in Amish country case, and the defendant is an 18-year-old, Samuel Hochstetler.
Yeah, he's accused of kidnapping, raping, and then killing a 28-year-old woman by the name of Rosanna Kinsinger. She's also Amish. This happened in March of this year. Prosecutors say the pair worked together on this farm, and that Hochstetler later admitted to laying a blanket or sheet over Kinsinger's head while they were having sex, or as he put it, breeding. He denied that he forced himself on her.
Yeah, he said that she did not say no to him or turn away from him, and his understanding was that was not forced. Let's get back into the courtroom now, though. The defense wants to throw out his confession to police, and they have him on the stand testifying during this pretrial hearing. Let's pick it up where we left off.
How is it that you got into the seat in which you rode to the sheriff's office?
One of them opened the door and motioned me to go sit there, and then they closed it.
Be as specific as you can. One of them being one of whom?
One of the ones was the vessel that drove the vehicle.
One of the uniformed deputies?
Yes.
Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay,
The
again,
other one had already left back towards this vehicle.
the other one being, again, Sergeant Tracy?
Sergeant Tracy, yes.
Okay, so when you got in the vehicle, how was the door open?
When I got back out,
No, when you got in.
one of the police officers in the vest, sheriffs, opened the door, and then I went in. He motioned me to go in, and then I sat on the seat, and then one of them closed it again.
Okay, so you didn't close the door.
No, I didn't touch the door.
Try to open it at any point in time.
No, I didn't touch anything.
Okay. And then what happened next?
They started driving, went in their seats, and then they started driving down the road.
Okay. What was your understanding in terms of your purpose for going to the sheriff's office and how long you might be there, if you had any understanding at all about that?
All I knew was they wanted to do DNA, and I didn't know. I just figured I'd be back just in a couple minutes. I didn't know.
Okay. Do you have a driver's license?
No.
Have you had any interaction with law enforcement prior to this day?
Only the closest I've been as law enforcement is maybe walk by him, or one of our drivers got pulled over once, and I heard him talk, but I've never had a reaction like me and them.
Okay, when you say one of your drivers, what do you mean one of your drivers? Is that an Amish person?
No.
English person, or?
It's an English driver,
Okay.
Yeah.
Someone not in the Amish community or in the Amish community?
not in the Amish community. He just drives for the Amish.
On this day, was there a vehicle available to you to drive?
No.
And if you did have a vehicle, would you have been able to drive it?
Not without a driver's license.
Okay. Did anyone follow you to the station in a vehicle, whether a driver or an English driver or an Amish person in a vehicle to take you home?
No.
What was your understanding of how you would get home if you were to be taken home?
I just expected they would take me back.
And when did you expect that to happen? After what occurrence?
I thought we was doing DNA, and it'd be right after that.
Okay. So when you got to the sheriff's office, how is it that you exited the back seat of the vehicle?
The one on the passenger side opened the door for me, and then he said I can get out and go over to that door on the front.
Okay. Did you know where you were to go at that point in time?
I did not know where we were. I didn't even know what part of town we were.
What did you do next?
I did what he said and just went to that door.
And you went to that door, by understanding, because he directed you to that door?
Yes, I had no clue where we was going.
Was anyone at that door when you got to that door?
Not that I can recall.
And were either of those deputies in front of you or behind you as you walked to the door?
They were behind me.
As you got to the door, how was the door open?
If I remember right, I don't for sure remember. I think one of them opened it, or they told me to open it.
But you don't remember whether you did or whether they did?
No, not on that one, no.
But you're sure that they told you to or they opened it?
They either opened it or they told me to open it.
Okay. And once the door was open, what did you do?
They would ask me to step inside.
Where did you go once you were inside?
There's a chair on the left. When you go right inside the door, there's a chair on the left. I just stood there.
Did they tell you where to sit or just to sit?
I think he said on the side towards the door.
On the side towards the door?
He didn't say it on the side towards the door, but he pointed to that chair.
Okay. And then where did they go? Where did they sit?
So we came in the door, and then I sat here, Lieutenant Campbell here, and Sergeant Tracy were on that end.
And what was your belief or your understanding of what was going to take place once you got up to that room at that point?
I thought we was going to do DNA. I started looking around the room, and I didn't know what they're going to do because I didn't see anything, kind of machines or anything.
And what, in fact, did happen once you got into the room?
The first thing was they started asking questions.
What type of questions did they ask you?
They wanted to know if I had an ID or a social security or something like that, and I didn't.
And how did that make you feel? What were you thinking at that point in time?
I didn't know why they needed that stuff for a DNA. I couldn't understand.
Okay, did you provide them anything in response to that request?
I gave them my hunting numbers.
I'm sorry?
My hunting numbers?
Your hunting numbers?
Yes, that's all I had.
Numbers.
I don't even know them. I just had them on my paper. They're in my wallet.
What numbers are they, but what is that?
It's a number that the Game Commission goes by, I guess, so they can look you up. Like, they can see if I bought a license or if I didn't for hunting.
Okay, so it's fair to say it's kind of like having a license for hunting purposes?
No, it's basically like identification so they can see what I got and what I didn't get.
Okay.
But it's not ID, not a real ID like you all would have.
All right, then what happened next once they had inquired about any identification that you may or may not have possessed at that point?
They just started asking questions.
And what types of questions do you recall them asking you?
They were just asking about kind of what I know about it, and
Be specific, what you know about what?
all right. So they started asking questions about what I know about Rosanna's death, and
Don't give me what any of your responses were.
Right.
In terms of what their questions were is what I'm asking.
sure. So they were asking me questions about her death, if I know what happened or how it went or stuff like that, and how it would have felt if it was on purpose or not on purpose or stuff like that.
Okay. And at some point in time, were you ever swabbed for DNA?
After almost an hour later,
Did
after they were,
surprise you?
I didn't know what DNA this was. I didn't know what we're doing for DNA.
Based on the questions they were asking you, and the fact that, well, again, what was your understanding about the reason you were taking them?
To do DNA.
To do DNA?
Yes.
And based on the questions they were asking, how did you feel? What were you thinking during that interim between your arrival and the hour later when they swabbed you for DNA?
I knew they wanted something. I didn't know what. I knew they was trying to make me say something that I didn't want to say, and I didn't know what.
Okay. What was your thinking in terms of whether or not you had or would have permission to leave if you chose to?
I never knew that I had permission to leave. They never said I was free to go anytime.
What was your thinking in terms of whether or not you would have permission to leave at any point in time?
Well, I had a thought of leaving, but I didn't think it would be any better because I knew there was 2 cops down there by the door, the only door I knew to exit. I knew I wouldn't make it past them. They had guns on them, everything. I didn't want to get shot and didn't want to get tased.
So did you think you would be permitted to leave or not permitted to leave?
I didn't know I had permission to leave.
There came a point in time when you were presented with what has been termed as your Miranda rights. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And can you describe how that occurred to the best of your recollection? How did that get initiated and why, if you know?
How I understood it?
How that got to be initiated, or why, or when did it become initiated?
After they decided I must be a suspect or something, they read that to me.
Okay. Did they read it to you, or did you read it yourself?
I read a little bit, and then they read a little bit too.
Okay.
I think they read most of it to me.
Did you have questions about what each item meant?
When I first seen them, I had no idea what it is. I didn't know what it was, what it meant.
Had you ever heard of a person's Miranda rights prior to that moment in time?
No, I didn't know.
Had any, well, I already asked a question about whether you had any prior law enforcement contact. You described it maybe during a traffic stop. I think that's what Stacy did. Is it through?
Miranda?
Yeah. Is that through?
Yeah. Swear out.
Yeah.
The bigger too, if you need to.
Okay. Do you recognize what is on the screen before you, Samuel?
Yes.
And what do you understand that to be?
What they call Miranda rights.
Now, you can read the English language, correct?
Yes.
What does it say in bold print in the a couple inches from the top in the center of the form?
Advice of rights. Is that what?
Well, above that, the bold words above that, in the section above that.
I don't know, he's pointing to ask me. Maybe take the mouse
There?
or.
No. In the center of the page,
That's
right there.
He just said what it said, but go ahead. Tell him again.
Advice of rights.
Okay. And what's listed below there, they're numbered 1 through 5 with your initials to the left of there. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is your understanding of what those things numbered 1 through 5 are?
When they read it to me or now?
Of what they are, not what they mean. What do you believe,
I guess rights.
What do you believe them to be?
The rights that I was supposed to have.
As a what? Suspect?
As a suspect, I guess, yeah.
Okay. And you feel that you have an understanding of what those rights mean as you sit here today?
Yes.
Do you have the same understanding as you sit here today as you did at the end of the session with Sergeant Tracy and Lieutenant Campbell of what those rights meant?
No.
Why do you have a different understanding today than you had at that point in time back on May the 5th?
Because of you and being around other inmates that educated me.
Educated you in the sense that what?
Of what my rights were. You told me what the rights are.
Okay, and other inmates?
And they told me what the rights are and to stand for my rights.
And how would you say your understanding of what those rights meant on May the 5th differ from what you understand today? What was your understanding of those rights on May the 5th?
On May the 5th, I was going home that evening. I had never expected to be where I am now.
Direct examination, that's the defense asking the questions because this is their motion hearing. We'll get a break, we'll get the cross, see how prosecutors handle this. It was a good ending there where he said, never would have thought I'd be in this position.
And doesn't understand Miranda, and he actually has a case in that argument. We'll be back.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, a hit and run at 70 miles per hour leaves 2 teenagers dead. We'll dive deeper into the tragic details and the suspect's ties to local police.
Closing Arguments tonight at 8/7 Central on Court TV.
These are the cases that captivated the world.
Couldn't keep my life straight.
They were killed by their own children.
That challenged the legal system and ourselves. Court TV, Legendary Trials.
.com.
Welcome back. Thanks for following along with us as we watch together this motion to suppress a statement hearing. It's a pretrial hearing for an Amish man who's accused of raping and killing a woman that he worked with.
Prosecutors said that 18-year-old Samuel Hochstetler admitted to laying a sheet or a blanket over 28-year-old Rosanna Kinsinger while they were having sex. He ultimately admitted to killing her.
Yeah, he says it was a suffocation, but his defense team is trying to get that statement where he said suffocation thrown out. The prosecution, they've charged Hochstetler with kidnapping, rape, and murder in the woman's death. Let's go back into the courtroom where Hochstetler is on the stand now, testifying to how he thought if he admitted to the murder that he would be granted forgiveness and be allowed to go home.
Can you read that, number one?
I have the right to remain silent.
What did that mean to you on May the 5th?
I didn't have to say anything.
Okay. And then as far as number two?
Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law.
Okay. Now, we listened today, you had some questions about that particular one.
Yes.
Correct?
Yes.
And what were those questions? What did you or did you not understand about that particular right on May the 5th?
I didn't know what a court was, and I didn't know what it meant by getting used against me on a court of law or anything.
Okay. And in the explanations that we heard given today, through the playing of, what was it, Stage Exhibit 2 and 3, or no? 1 and 2. And through the testimony of particularly Lieutenant Campbell and Sergeant Tracy, is your understanding different today because of what I told you or because of what other inmates told you than from what Lieutenant Campbell and Sergeant Tracy told you?
It is different from what Lieutenant and Campbell and Sergeant Tracy has told me is what I know now.
Okay. What did you believe was going to happen that day at any point in time when they would have ceased questioning you? At that time, what did you believe would happen?
I thought we was going to go see a judge and I was going to have to tell him what I did. And
why did you believe you were going to see a judge?
That's what he told me.
That's what who told you?
Lieutenant Campbell.
Okay. And what did he tell you you would need to do before the judge?
Tell him what I do and what I did, and then the judge, that's what the judge would forgive me for.
Okay, so what did you think the judge would do if you told them certain things? And again, I'm not asking you what you said at any point in time, but what did you think if you went before a judge and you made certain statements, what did you think would happen?
I thought I was going to be forgiven by the judge and go home. That's what I thought.
Did you appear before a judge that day?
No.
Were you forgiven and did you go home that day?
No. And I'm still not.
What led you to believe that you would go before a judge and be forgiven and be able to go home?
I have always believed and trusted in the authorities, but now I don't.
You had indicated earlier that you thought of leaving the sheriff's office, but you didn't want to leave because you thought you might get tased. Is that correct?
That was just one thing that I knew that if they want to catch me, that I would.
How do you know about a taser?
Because I know that's what cops carry.
How do you know that?
I knew they carried tasers and guns.
Okay, but how did you come to learn that?
Just was the other people what they tell me about them.
When was this?
Somewhere in Kentucky.
Okay.
This one, it didn't come from cops.
Okay. So did you have contact with law enforcement officers in Kentucky?
That's where I was when my driver got pulled over while we was going on a trip.
Okay. Did the officer talk to you at that time?
Not to me.
Okay.
Just to the driver.
Okay. As it relates to this case, though, you did have contact with law enforcement officers before May 5th, correct?
Detectives.
Right.
That's the only. I just talked to him maybe, I don't know, 4 minutes, 3 minutes.
Okay. And you knew that they had questions regarding the circumstances surrounding Rosanna's death?
That's what all they asked me was if I know anything about it.
Okay. And isn't that essentially what they were asking you on May 5th?
Not just that. They asked me further questions.
At the beginning of the conversation, that's essentially what...
That's what they started out with, yes.
Sure. So you weren't surprised because you'd already been through that, correct?
What did they ask me?
You weren't surprised, yes or no?
I was surprised that they're asking me questions about that. I thought we was doing DNA, that's all. I didn't know that was what we was gonna have for DNA.
Sure. Okay, and just so we're all clear, you do understand English perfectly fine, correct?
I think for the most part.
Okay. And
every now and then I have a little question with some of the big words.
Sure. I don't use big words usually. So if you don't understand something I'm saying or how I'm saying something, just let me know and I'll rephrase it, okay?
Yes.
Have you heard anything today that you didn't understand?
I don't think so.
Okay. When law enforcement showed up on Dye Road, did you tell them that you did not want to give your DNA?
No, I didn't know better.
Okay. At any time, did you tell them that you didn't want to give your DNA?
No.
Okay. When you were placed in the cruiser, did you tell them that you did not want to get into the cruiser?
No, I didn't know better.
Okay. Did you tell them that you wanted out of the cruiser?
No.
When you got to the sheriff's office, did you tell law enforcement officers that you did not want to go into the sheriff's office?
No.
When you were in the sheriff's office, did you tell them that you wanted to leave?
No. I didn't know I could.
When law enforcement was on Dye Road, they did not place you in handcuffs, correct?
No.
And they did not place you in handcuffs while you're in the cruiser?
No.
And before the interview, you were not placed in handcuffs, correct?
No.
When you had indicated during the interview or at some point when you're at the sheriff's office that you thought of leaving, did you tell anybody that?
No.
You understood most of what Lieutenant Campbell and Sergeant Tracy were telling you that day, correct?
The way they explained it, I did understand it, but not to what the rights meant.
You say you did or did not?
I did to the way they explained it, but not to what the rights meant, what the rights stand for.
Okay, so everything that they told you on that day about those rights, you understood at that time?
At that time, how they related it to me.
But you're just saying that.
I understand them now the way that they're actually supposed to be understood.
Okay, based upon what your attorney told you?
That and the inmates, yes.
Okay. You think that's different from what?
It's way different, yes.
But they told you you have the right to remain silent, correct?
Right, but I didn't know what that right was, how valuable that right was, and what it really meant.
Okay.
On the May 5th.
Okay. Regardless of how valuable in your mind you thought that right was, you knew that you had that right not to say a single word, correct?
Yes, but I didn't know why not to talk.
Okay. Well, you decided to talk because you thought it was the right thing to do, right?
Yes, that's out of respect, yes.
Sure. But it does not negate the fact that they told you that right, you read that right, and you signed off on that right, correct?
Yes.
And throughout the process, when they were reading your rights and you were reading the rights yourself, you did have some questions, right?
Yes.
Okay, but you didn't ask them about remaining silent as far as the value of that right, correct?
Well, I knew what it meant to be silent. I knew it meant not to talk.
Okay.
But I didn't understand it the way I should have.
And you agree that these are your rights, these 5 enumerated rights, these are your rights?
Yes.
Okay. You're not trying to say that you have rights for further explanation of these, right?
No, I have these 5 rights is what I agree to.
Right, okay.
Okay, that cross-examination of the defendant, it basically wrapped up the hearing for Samuel Hochstetler, and the judge in real time has yet to rule on whether or not to allow his confession in during this trial that is ahead in the future for this case.
Yeah, he's going to, or the judge, she is going to share her ruling later, and they're going to submit basically closing arguments, written closing arguments at the end of the month. October 22nd is the deadline for that, and then the defense will find out. It's going to be a vastly different case if that confession does not come in.